Scripter Screen keeps on trucking this week with this little ditty from 1992, where a bunch of cool cats get in over their heads. Meanwhile, we say hello to a brand new director that'll knock our socks off with this pick, and a lot more down the line. Here's Reservoir Dogs.
If I can give you a note, you sound almost too excited.
Thanks. All right, I'll take that into consideration. Hello, welcome to all you lovely listeners. My name is Chris Kitchen. You're listening to Scripter Screen's brand new 10th episode. So, first caller gets a brand new Kia. I'm here joined by my co-host.
What's up? I'm Zach Strackman. Welcome to Scripter Screen.
This would be a really entertaining podcast if we wanted to talk like that the entire time, Zach. But I think those people, these lovely listeners, they don't want to listen to that crap. No, they don't want to listen to our best K. Billy impressions.
They don't want deadpan. They want enunciation and whatever the opposite of monotone is.
If you wanted deadpan and silence and monotone and crisp audio, then go listen to NPR.
Go back to listen to our first episode.
Was that pretty deadpan? I can't remember.
I think I was. I'm trying to, raise and lower my tone a bit to sound a bit more lively in our discussions.
Yeah, it would be great if you could bring some enthusiasm into work.
I'm sorry. Zachary. It's been, listen, we took a week off. We had a lot of stuff going on. For our lovely listeners who don't know, we exist in the South Florida region of the United States of America. And aside from one recent election week and a very mild hurricane,
listen, I would argue that we postponed the episode not because of all that, but because of me and my dumb schedule.
I was trying to help you.
No, I'll take the blame. It was my fault. I'm sorry, guys. I got preoccupied with things, and but I'm back now, kind of. This episode even got almost delayed again due to things, but I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm calm. Somebody grab me a Xanax. Actually, that's a lie. I don't take Xanax. Don't do drugs, kids.
But or
adults.
There was an election this past week. A very long and
let's get political, out. Zach. How did you feel about the election?
I don't want to get political. But I mean, I'll just say I'm happy with the result, but I'm not going to get into it.
You know what I'm not happy about? I'll tell you what I'm not happy about. Alec Baldwin got fired from SNL as he will no longer have a character to play.
I think were you starting to say Alex Trebek and then you hit Baldwin?
No. Oh. I was trying to avoid that.
But think about this. When one door closes, another door opens, and now we have Jim Carrey as Joe Biden. So, listen, this is not a political podcast, and I will not let it go down that route.
That's fine, but you did mention something that we did lose some pretty tremendous faces.
We got a few cases of the big sads late in the time since our last episode.
Yeah, with the passing of Sean Connery, dear Sean Connery, and more recently Alex Trebek. I am I'm super saddened by all this news.
It was a bummer. Well, for someone like, Sean Connery, he was 90 years old, I think, and
he lived a pretty full life.
He had already retired from acting, so it was more of like a it was bound to happen any time now. But Alex Trebek, I mean, we knew he was
battling cancer for the last couple of years.
And it finally just got to a point. I've been watching Jeopardy, every night, usually when it's on television. And as of the recording of this, we're in like his last 35.
I think it's his last 35 episodes, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad that the producers are honoring his wishes to make sure that those all remain aired and everything.
Right, but so his final episode I think is supposed to air Christmas Day.
Oh wow.
So that's going to be a fun way to spend the holidays.
You know.
But I think, one thing that helps us get through crazy elections and some of our favorite television and film people passing away and a literal hurricane is settling down with a nice classic movie, especially from a director who I know I personally, and I'm pretty sure you as well, hold in very high regard.
I have no idea who you're talking about.
Me neither.
Okay, thank you for listening to Script or Screen. Please remember to like, subscribe, and follow. I'm just kidding,
Instagram,
guys.
Facebook, MySpace.
But for real, guys, if you haven't already, go subscribe and follow our social media pages. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Script or Screen. Give us a follow. Give us a listen. If you're trying to listen to the podcast on any other platforms, we're on the Spotify, the Apple Podcasts, the Google Podcasts. Go to scriptorscreen.com and find out which platform you can listen to our podcast on.
And
or
give us suggestions. Oh, yeah, go. Keep going.
I was just, if you're comfortable with the one you're listening to it at the current moment, then that's fine too.
Maybe
but yeah, Zach, you're right. You could go to our website. We're just totally off our...
It's been a crazy week. I was going to say... compare how we sound on each podcast platform and let us know which one sounds the crispiest.
I want to say it all sounds the same. Actually, for those who don't know, if they listen to the earlier episodes, our YouTube audio is actually a little different in the first 3 episodes than it is on the audio listening platforms. I don't know if you know this, because the YouTube one uses a WAV file versus all the other, files since then have been super compressed due to data sizes and files and type and all that.
Just another problem we're facing in 2020.
Oh my God. But we live and we learn. But hey, we appreciate your ears. Thank you for being here. We're going to celebrate the 10th episode of Script or Screen by talking about... Yeah, we did make it. Actually, I would. You and I have been planning the show for a while, or at least trying to find our way, how we're going to work together. You and I have been friends for a couple years now.
I think it's been a minute.
So it's like this, and we thought, well, how do we share our love for movies with literally anybody?
We tried everything. We tried running up to strangers on the street. We tried just sending out random letters to anyone who could listen.
One person replied. Did you know that?
No.
They sent to us at my home address, which I don't know how they got, and they said, "Dear Zachary, why are you living in Chris's house? Please leave."
They said, "Don't write me again."
Signed, Christopher.
Oh, wow.
Wow, I wonder who that could be from.
But if you guys have, if you've listened with us for these 10 episodes, thank you for coming along on the ride, because it's been an interesting experience delving into the world of podcasts and getting our feel for it. And I'd like to think now, as we hit double digits, I think we're a little bit more loose and familiar with it than when we started out.
I would even say a little more comfortable with each other. Now we know that, how everything works,
well,
so to speak.
I'll tell you something. There's only one thing better than resting on your laurels only 10 episodes in. And that's coming out of the gate swinging, which is exactly what this gentleman by the name of Quentin Tarantino did.
I mean, swinging? Come on. This guy was hitting homers, baby. Yeah. What are you talking about? He was out of the park. Quentin Tarantino, a product of everything and anything multimedia entertainment. Really,
if you could distill just the pure essence of individual like fandoms of different genres down into like a single person, I think it's Tarantino.
Yeah. Funny enough, Zach, we actually have Quentin Tarantino in the studio today.
Oh,
So let's bring him out. Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Quentin Tarantino. That's
Wow.
like totally crazy.
Wow, it's like I'm there
I know. Well, you are here,
in spirit.
and well, in the podcast studio space.
Let me tell you something. When what's it called? The Hateful Eight came out. My sister and brother-in-law went to go see it. In I think they were living in Chicago at the time. They might have been living in Portland at the time, but
I was going to say, don't they live in Chicago?
yeah,
now?
and they went to go see a showing of it where Tarantino was there in person. So my sister has actually seen Tarantino in person, and my brother-in-law has actually asked him a question in person.
What was the question? Do you remember?
It had to do, I don't know the exact question. It had to do with the Ennio Morricone score. Ugh.
Great score.
Yeah.
I'll kind of use this as a lifting off point of transition. What was your first exposure to Quentin Tarantino?
My first exposure to the greatness that is Quentin Tarantino.
Yes.
It might have been Kill Bill. It might have been
Really?
Kill Bill.
You know, I want to say
I'm ashamed to admit this, but my snobbery for film really started late, and so it wasn't until like I would say halfway through high school that I started going like, oh, movies are bad, and you know, most movies, you know, you can tell what's a good movie and what's a bad movie, and it, you know, movies aren't just good because they're cool. And so Tarantino, I think, was one of those first directors where I was like, he's not only cool, but like his movies, but that like, you know, there's a quality to them. So I think Kill Bill might have been like my first kind of foray into his what do you call it, repertoire.
So. What year would you say that was for you?
Oh,
Well, did you see Kill Bill when it first came out, or a little after?
probably no. I mean, definitely not when it first came out, because it came out in 2003, 2004. This was probably like 2007.
Interesting. So I have a fun story to tell you about my first experience with Tarantino as well. I actually had no idea who Quentin Tarantino really was. I would say until Inglourious Bastards. I know. Granted, I'm still rather young, I'd like to say. 25 isn't too old. But my first experience watching one of his films was Kill Bill as well. And it was not even in theaters or anything. It was just a DVD that my dad had, and he would play it. Funny enough, when we were camping once, he had like a little TV set up. And I just remember the moment I saw this poor gentleman's head getting cut off, I knew in that moment I could not watch this movie. This is the scariest thing I have ever seen in my entire life. And so I immediately shut off and didn't pursue any more Quentin Tarantino-ness until the year 2009, I think. When did Inglourious Bastards came out?
2009.
Because that was the next film I saw of him and really started to learn his name. And that is my favorite Tarantino movie. I'll say it now, Inglourious Bastards. Then many years later, I'd go back to watch Kill Bill, realizing like, oh my God, like this was the same guy. He made that movie too. Like, oh, dude, that was a realization that was kind of unfortunate because, you know, I was really young when I first watched that head cut off gore scene. I don't think I was ready for that type of.
It shook your little mind to its core.
It shook my little soul. It really did. I was not ready for that.
Man,
needless to say, I mean, anytime that I see guts exploding and, you know, people's heads being bashed in and things like that, I'm all for it now, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, you know what gets me in these movies? It's never the big bombastic like head exploding things. It's the little things that bother me. The little
That bother you, or
realistic
that
things
pull you in?
that will both. But it's the things that make my skin crawl is like when it's like a little tiny something. It's
Give me a
the
little example. Just give me a little something.
the bride stepping on the eyeball in Kill Bill
Oh,
Volume 2.
oh.
But
Um,
but you know what's funny? It's I'm gonna throw around the big film school term that gets thrown around I think a lot when people talk about Tarantino, and it's auteur theory. You know, he's an auteur, as in like French for author. But
I have my film theory textbook next to me. I could pull it out and read the definition if you'd like.
no, I mean I know it. And
For the audience, for the audience.
well, for the audience, the auteur theory insists that there are certain aspects of a person's work that basically act as identifiers for their being of that person's uh being one of their works. So if the movie's got a lot of lens flares and crash zooms and a big mystery with no answers, you're probably watching a J.J. Abrams film.
I was gonna say, is J.J. Abrams a crash zoom kind of guy? I feel
maybe?
like the you got the lens flares and the mystery endings for sure. But
Okay, so maybe no crash zooms. I think I see him a lot in his movies, but
Abrams Tarantino's a crash zoom kind of guy.
he does do a lot. But I like Tarantino's crash zooms because they're like comedic.
They are. They're pretty great.
It's always to punctuate something.
Yeah.
But Tarantino, I think, even before I knew what the term auteur or auteur theory or any of that hoity-toity stuff was.
I just want to insert about that word. I remember the first time I ever heard the word auteur, I think I heard it about 1,000 other times in the same week. And I was like, man, maybe I just didn't realize I've been hearing this word all my entire life. And it's just, it was too coincidental that I would just hear it every other time since the first time I've ever heard it. Just a thought.
I think it's a great thing. It's like, Nolan and Tarantino and so many, Hitchcock, all these guys, they are auteurs. They are, they have particular, I almost see it like, they have their dance moves, and their dance moves, and you go, oh, that's a Tarantino thing. That's a Michael Bay thing. Michael Bay, he loves his shots, his spinning shots where they track around the character while the background moves in an almost parallaxing.
Listen, we'll talk about Michael Bay on another day because I got a lot to say about Michael Bay.
But what I mean by all this is that when talking about like auteur theory, Tarantino's maybe the first director where I didn't know the term auteur theory, but I was like, that idea was in my head where I was like, okay, so I saw Kill Bill Volume 1, Volume 2, and then I want to say the next one I saw after that was either like, Reservoir Dogs. No, I definitely saw Pulp Fiction before Reservoir Dogs. But it was one of those things where as I was watching it, I'm like, oh, that was kind of like in that other movie. And oh, he did this and that. And that's kind of a similar technique he used there. And before I knew it, I was like, okay, I'm beginning to understand that there are certain aspects of this director and his style where I'm going to see that pop up in his movies that I wouldn't really see so much in other movies, not without his fingerprints on them. And yeah, I think he was really the first director that I really started paying attention to, where I said, I really like his style, and obviously his writing is amazing. And like I said, like I think it's important for me for the formation of my understanding of film and my appreciation of it, that I got into Tarantino.
I mean, I would kind of agree as like when I finally started getting into his work. I mean, I think the order of which I've seen the films, it started, I guess at Kill Bill and then Inglourious Basterds, and then I got to see Django Unchained was my first one I got to see in theaters.
Okay.
which is pretty late in the game, right? But at the same time, I would then later watch, Death Proof, Reservoir Dogs. The only one I've yet to watch is Jackie Brown, actually.
Oh my
And
god, I love Jackie Brown. It's so underrated because it's his first movie after Pulp Fiction.
we're going to talk about it on the podcast at some point soon.
Yeah, I can't wait
Yeah.
because I love Jackie Brown. It is such a great movie. And that's what I love about Tarantino is because he has a very small filmography. He, he's very careful with how he chooses what movie to work on. And even his worst movie, Death Proof, is like it's bad on purpose because that's kind of what he was going for. I hate when
people say that. I know you say this, and it's part of this whole bigger scheme of things, but I don't necessarily think it's a terrible movie.
Well, no, it's not a terrible movie, but like it's definitely like it's meant to be a rip on like exploitation movies, grindhouse movies because it was part of the Grindhouse double feature
with Robert Rodriguez.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I like that, he didn't try to like, he was like, I could make this as good as possible, but the fact that he did make it a little corny and a little over the top and a little shitty, it speaks to like the care that Tarantino has with his movies, where he wants to pay such homage to like 70s grindhouse films that he will purposefully make his movie bad just to kind of be a send up because those movies kind of sucked back in the day.
Right. So at this point, I kind of want to coincide with these thoughts with this idea of Quentin Tarantino being an auteur, right? Because he borrows so much and is inspired by so many things that, and it's all kind of been driven down into him, and his body of work is a reflection of all that. Then would we, in fact, call him an auteur if, his originality is technically based off of just stealing things which he's admitted to and said, like, that's what makes it so perfect, is that I can take the exact same moment, the exact same technique used by other filmmakers, the people that I learned from and I appreciate so much and using it in my own work. Like, would it make him an auteur in a certain sense? Or,
well, I would say it's not so much in the...
Because I do think that we all do think that he is an auteur in his own sense, but it's like I feel like just personally it comes from the fact that he takes from everything else and combines it into his thing, and
I would
he has
say
like a special.
On one hand, you could definitely say like, yeah, he takes from this, he takes from that. My way of seeing it is he wears his inspirations on his sleeve.
Okay.
I think, there are some people where they really want to mask where they're inspired by things, and they say, well, yes, it was inspired by that, but I really wanted to get away from that to make it my own. And I think Tarantino is the unabashed fanboy. He's the one who's like, no, I love the movie Inglourious Bastards, from the 1970s. So I named my movie the same thing, and it's not the same story, but I just love that movie, so I'm gonna use the title.
I see that. I don't know. I just feel like it kind of works for him in such a way, and everybody's in a way just very okay with it. Yeah, there is. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of intrigue.
I think that's the difference. Is whenever he makes these movies, it's like you can tell he's really just into it.
You hear from all his colleagues and all these interviews with, anybody who's ever worked with him ever, that no one knows more about film than him. Maybe Martin Scorsese, right? Just because of you see all the parodies of these people and just, it's always movie facts and things and all these little bits. But I feel like there should be like some sort of variety or like article, Hollywood Reporter, where they just do a one-on-one, like, who knows more about movies, or like who could guess these trivia. That would actually be super interesting.
Yeah,
I don't know about you. I love watching.
Listening, and if you're listening and it becomes a success, just credit us.
Yeah, there you go. I would appreciate that at least. Maybe we can do that on our show.
I know, like, whenever I watch, like, behind-the-scenes stuff with Tarantino, it's like you can or if I see, like, set photos, you can always tell he's the most excited person to be there. Whether it's, like, I know when I saw set photos from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that came out last year, like, he's on set in, like, like, kind of like a hippie get up. He's got a headband on and stuff. He's really feeling the vibe that he wants to be felt by the audience when they're watching the movie.
Yeah.
I've seen, like, clips of him behind the scenes where he gets everyone on set to chant about how they love making movies and stuff. Just, I think he's just like I said, I think no one is having a better time on a Tarantino set than Tarantino.
Sorry, hold on, I'm just trying to retrace one of the steps that you were saying. Just kind of going back to, like, all these photos and everything, like, he is the most excited, but I think it's also because he wants to put in a lot of this work and all this inspiration to page and to film too, like, big film enthusiast, himself, along with known film enthusiast Christopher Nolan, who puts it over everything else, including the safety of other people. Sorry, I just had to get that out there. But in a way, it's like, I respect these guys for doing such things and putting such passion in their work, because it really does reflect. You said earlier, his filmography is very limited. He only ever planned to do 10 films himself before venturing off into other things, because he doesn't want to have some sort of bad filmography. He wants all of his projects to be very representative of, I guess, his skills and just what he kind of has to bring to the world of motion pictures, right?
What I like is that when he is talked about other projects where he might do this or he might try that, but you can tell if it's not something he's passionate about, he'll drop it. Like he was poised to direct and write a Star Trek film, and it was going to be an R-rated Star Trek film, and that's like
there was never like ever confirmation though if that would be like his 10th film or if that would be something else or what.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's all but dropped at this point. I'm pretty sure that's just been, cast aside.
I think he's right. I mean, I think he had talks with, I believe, both Paramount, J.J. Abrams, and another guys. Excuse me, just another group of people or organization that he would then step down from directing and then do more of like a story, like a treatment, and then hand off that treatment to other writers. I mean, to be honest, I'm super interested in that. I'm going to do a quick search right now.
Actually, I'm seeing from January of this year via IndieWire that Tarantino hints at Star Trek Exit. I don't think I'm going to direct it.
Oh, okay. Well, still, that's fine.
He said, I think they might make that movie, but I don't think I'm going to direct it.
Well, you know what? I don't know if I necessarily wanted his 10th film to be the Star Trek film. If he wants to do some sort of space, his own thing, that would be super cool, actually.
That would be cool, but almost like...
What would a Quentin Tarantino sci-fi look like?
It would be weird. You know what I would like? And I think I would love to see this. So... just looking at like the trajectory of his films, starts off with Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction and Jackie Brown, which are these 1990s set crime films. Mm-hmm. Then you start kind of getting into his genre work. He does the Kill Bill movies. He does Death Proof. Then he goes back in time with Inglourious Bastards, even further back in time with Django Unchained and Hateful Eight. And then he comes back up to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in the 1960s. And I would love if he was going to end it at 10 films, with his next film being the 10th, I would love to see him do a return to form and come back to like a modern day just crime film.
Yeah.
Because those early movies are, when I saw Kill Bill, I was like, yeah, this is really good. But I think it was when I saw Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, I was like, this guy is amazing.
Yeah, I would agree.
And I would love to see him just bookend his career with like the same like genre.
I would agree. But I mean, why tease everybody with the thought, let's get into it. Reservoir Dogs.
Reservoir Dogs.
Here's a brief synopsis about the film for the uninitiated. Though I will be judging you if you are uninitiated and haven't seen this film. So spoiler alert. When a simple jewelry heist goes horribly wrong, the surviving criminals begin to suspect that one of them is a police informant.
Egads.
How is that for a synopsis? Do you like that one, or should I find a better one?
No, that's pretty good. I think that's pretty succinct. It doesn't spoil anything. But by the way, when we get into this, we will be going full spoilers, so keep that in mind.
I said that.
Did you? I don't know. I don't know things.
So, almost like our hopes with Tarantino doing a return to form, Zach, we've also done a return to form in this podcast.
Oh?
We brought the script out for Reservoir Dogs.
Dusted it off.
This was something, we haven't read a couple scripts in a few episodes. That's because we've been dealing with a lot of TV stuff. We've been dealing with some newer films that the scripts aren't necessarily out. And then the ones that are, they're like transcribed copies that fans have done. And it's just, some of them not too good. But this one, you can't ignore a Quentin Tarantino screenplay, my friend.
I would say, yeah, if there was ever someone, whose script needed to be read and analyzed, it's Tarantino. I still remember when I read the script for Django Unchained before the movie was even out. That was a fun read because I actually went into that movie knowing completely what was going to happen, which led to some very interesting scenes where the way Tarantino writes a scene and the way it ends up being portrayed in the film can sometimes be one-to-one and sometimes be vastly different.
But I mean, let me tell you, from reading this script, I read the entirety of it. I read it today, in fact, as us recording this.
Yeah.
I learned, first and foremost, his first film, all about character. These characters drive this story. These crimesmen, these heist compadres.
Crimesmen.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to call them. You have Mr. Blonde, Mr. Blue, Mr. Brown, Mr. Orange, Mr. Pink, and Mr. White. Excuse me.
Say Mr. Blonde.
I did say Mr. Blonde. He was the first one I said. I didn't do it in the exact order of the film, but and then you have the lovely Joe Cabot and nice guy Eddie, of course. Just this uncanny, this just unlikely group of anti-heroes, establishment.
I would not.
They're not heroes in any. Yeah,
they are full-blown villains.
Yeah, they're all criminals in their own regard, except for one of them. Who's
by the way, I would
undercover.
like to actually make a really quick note. This was not Tarantino's first script. His first screenplay was True Romance.
Right.
But that movie actually came out a year after Reservoir Dogs.
He got it. I don't know if you're familiar with a documentary that came out a year ago. It's called the QT8, which is the first 8 Quentin Tarantino's documentary that was leading up to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Okay.
He talked about writing, or he didn't talk about, but his roommate in the documentary would talk about how he wrote the scripts for True Romance, Reservoir Dogs, and even From Dusk Till Dawn almost around the same time. The thing about True Romance is that he kind of sold it as an option, which means that he brought it to a producer. The producer bought it for like $1,000 and then would take it around to studios and see who wanted that script to be made. Then once they decided it would be made, and they would buy the rights. So he wasn't actually able to direct it at that point because he had nothing kind of behind his back yet, or behind him. And so he then decided, I need to make something that I can actually direct, which is why Reservoir Dogs became his first directorial debut. That was it.
a little bit of movie magic.
It is. Honestly though, you can still tell in True Romance.
Yeah,
it's very Tarantino's as is.
Absolutely. The dialogue is very much his.
But I mean, with Reservoir Dogs, his kind of comeuppance of trying to getting it made and everything. I actually learned this about a year ago. I got an opportunity to intern for the Sundance Directors Lab. He actually was able to become a director fellow for this lab, and brought Reservoir Dogs with him and casted someone like Steve Buscemi so they could film an entire couple scenes up on the mountain in Sundance, Utah, and just perfect artist, like an artist bubble, if you will, just away from everything to try to figure out how to direct something really well. And then it kind of translated. Steve Buscemi even got the part in the film, and it was just great. It really, he kind of found his footing. It even helps that he knew somebody that knew Harvey Keitel. Yep. And they brought it to, I think, Lawrence Benders. Am I wrong? Am I right?
I believe, yeah. So Harvey Keitel was able to kind of show it to the right people and get it better funded and moved along, so that way it actually had a chance.
I think people refer to Reservoir Dogs also being like kind of the birth of the independent or film or cold film kind of sensation in the 90s.
It was a bit of a sleeper hit.
But I mean, like, also incredibly underfunded in the beginning. What was it? He had raised $30,000 to try to make the movie in the first place, with a great money of which he made by playing a great Elvis impersonator from Golden Girls. Yeah. But then I guess they ended up raising the budget or getting a budget of somewhere between $1 and $3 million.
Yep. And a lot of the budget, I think, you can see with, like, just obviously it is a bottle movie. It is all basically in one location, which was an abandoned funeral home. And that's why the warehouse has a hearse in it and a bunch of coffins.
Here's a fun fact. Did you know that all the actors came in to work with their own suits and clothes? And they only had one pair for each of them, so they had to film all the blood scenes at the very end.
Like that. And the other budgetary thing was that originally the idea of not showing the heist, a heist movie without the heist, was a budgetary decision. But as more money came in, Tarantino realized he liked the idea of not showing the heist and just kind of dealing with the aftermath and the events leading up to it. And I think the movie's better for it.
So let's talk about the structure of the film then, because there's this kind of overlying theme that would then progress into his future films of nonlinear storytelling.
Yes,
because that's what this film really kind of grasps a hold of. It's almost separated into chapters, like most of his other films, not by, I guess, number, but more by names.
Right. We're still a bit in like proto Tarantino phase here, where it has a lot of the hallmarks of it, but some of his mainstay features are not yet in. Namely, like the named numbered chapters and a couple of techniques here and there.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I don't know. How do you feel about it? What do you have any other memories or filmmakers that you can think of that use this technique as well?
Nolan.
Sure. Oh, Nolan. Well. Yeah. Well, but Tarantino came before Nolan.
Yes, he did. Well,
I guess. Nolan's earliest film was around the same time.
Yeah. So I mean, they're both. They both play with this like non-linearity with their storytelling.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I think with Tarantino is probably my favorite one who does it, because I really enjoy the way he structures his films. a lot of times with these nonlinear films, you'll get a like a what they call starting in media res, where you're dropped in the middle of it, and then it might flash forward or flash back, and
I think most recently I remember the scene in the Sonic movie, if you will, where it's like, hey, that's me, Sonic. You're probably wondering how I got here. And then it just, I don't know if you remember that. And
yeah,
then it rewinds to the very first moment. So that's, I mean, that's very campy. That's very, it's a meme almost at this point, you know, like,
right.
But
This
but
movie,
his stories, they don't do that.
well, so it sort of technically, in the grand chronology of this story, it does kind of start in media res, but like not in like the action. It starts in like the build
calm
up
before
to
the
the
storm.
action. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's not until and we never really get that the action of it. We only hear them talk about it, which I personally I like, because I think it paints a more interesting picture of what went down. Because we don't have the exact information, we can only go off of the details of the different characters. So when one character is like, well, the alarms went off and then this guy started shooting, and they're like, no, he started shooting and then the alarms went off, and it puts you in this,
In a way, it's
position
like
of confusion that they're in.
yeah, like who's hearsay? It's all hearsay, right? And so now we're just trying to figure out, like who really has the. Actually, this film really does a great job, and especially in its finale, in regards to giving us clues and ideas about people's warped perspectives and their realities that they're living in.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, I want to go back to like that very first scene, like you're saying, like we're just a small introduction to all of our characters, enjoying breakfast, talking about music, Madonna lyrics,
And how she's apparently being like plowed so hard she can't walk or something. It's, you know,
very inappropriate, very of the time.
As a writer, I tend not to put my own personal thoughts and ideas into my own writing. But I can't help but wonder if this is just something Tarantino
I put my thoughts and
of.
ideas into writing all the time, but then I have to think twice about them.
Well, I don't try to. I try not to put myself too much into it, and I feel like Tarantino's whole like thing about tipping and Madonna and stuff. That's very much Tarantino being like, well, you know what I think, but that's okay, because you know he's getting his. This is kind of like his big break, and I'll let him have it because he raised some good points. But
you know, and not only does he have his self insert, like in terms of his writing, but he puts himself in the movie. He plays the character of Mr. Brown, you know, and he's the one spitting out. He didn't have the tipping lines versus he just discussed the Madonna lyrics and and all of that nonsense. But
he wrote it. He wrote it, and so I have to think that on some level maybe he believes it.
As someone who used to work for tips, I'm offended by you, sir. What an interesting opener, at least, because at the same time, unless you watch trailers and everything, you don't really know what these characters are about. It's not until my favorite part about that scene is just when Joe gets his book stolen, his little black book stolen, and then he looks over to Mr. Blonde and says to played by Michael Madsen, and Mr. White's played by Harvey Keitel. He looks over to Mr. Blonde saying, "Can you shoot this guy?"
Yeah.
And then he just finger guns at him, and the other guy like pretends he gets hit. Like, oh, these moments are just so telling about what these characters will end up becoming. The foreshadowing is just perfect.
Well, what I love, it does a couple of things. One, it lets us know who these characters are. Two, it tricks us into thinking that they're a really well-oiled machine when they are probably the farthest thing from it.
Yeah.
And it makes you think like, okay, so if you kind of go into the movie knowing what it's about, knowing that it's about a botched heist, then you go like, oh, these guys are kind of like, you know, they're cool criminals, you know, but then it kind of goes to crap very fast. But what I think is interesting is if you don't know what this movie is about, if you go into this movie completely blind, you really don't get a good idea of what's going on for a little while, because you go from just a bunch of guys in suits in a diner talking and kind of screwing around to this really cool shot of them walking to the car, and then before you know it, one of them is dying in the back of a car, and they're screaming at each other and pointing guns at each other, and you have to kind of peel back the layers and watch the movie and see how, as these little details are drip fed to you, what happened. And that's, I think half the fun of the movie is if you don't know what happened, putting it together and saying, okay, well, this guy apparently went crazy and started killing people, and this guy ran off, and this person's dead. And
yeah, you just get the slow build of the story as a whole. And I mean, so then I'm gonna kind of switch to kind of performances right now, like as we get into these parts of the movie.
First off, do we want to cover the cast here?
Yeah, for sure. Let's go through. So we have Harvey Keitel as Mr. White, whose real name we find out is Larry Dimmick.
Yep.
We have Tim Roth, who stars as Mr. Orange, or Freddie Neuendijk. Yeah. Michael Madsen as the infamous Mr. Blonde, also known as Vic Vega. You may find his last name familiar. That's because technically he is related to John Travolta's character in Pulp Fiction.
Vincent Vega. And I believe at a point in time, Tarantino meant to do a Vega Brothers movie.
But then the actors got old, and he's like, well, I guess they're both dead in the end, so how would that work out? You have Chris Penn as Nice Guy Eddie, Steve Buscemi as Mr. Pink, Lawrence Teneri as Joe Cabot, Randy Brooks as Holdaway, excuse me, sorry. Kirk Baltz as Marvin Nash, Edward Bunker as Mr. Blue, Quentin Tarantino as Mr. Brown, and Stephen Wright as K. Billy.
K. Billy.
Now, for those of you
of the 70s.
Don't know. Exactly. That was our intro. For those of you who could actually appreciate that, I don't assume people understand what the hell we're doing.
They'll be like, wow, their quality dropped really bad for this new episode. But
for those of you who got it, we're very grateful, and we hope you enjoyed that.
You're our favorites.
Yeah. So, interesting cast right here. Like, there's some, to me, I look back and I see some heavy hitters, right? Michael Madsen.
Obviously, yeah.
I'm a big Steve Buscemi fan. I feel like it's not that he gets a bad rep, but it's like, Adam Sandler does a great job of casting Steve Buscemi as like the dirtiest characters in any of his movies. Outside of I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry, versus where he was like in a suit and he was.
Well, I just remember him from Billy
Big
Madison.
Daddy. Oh, Billy Madison. Yeah.
I'm sure glad I called that guy.
I was actually watching Billy Madison the other day. It's funny. But I love Steve Buscemi in this role.
This was, I think, a really good time for Steve Buscemi, because this was right around the same time that Fargo came out.
Yeah.
And, when he was at the point when he played kind of, he could be like a loudmouth and a real, like, son of a bitch, but, like, it fit his character so well. I think, they kind of went along a good ways to building him up for his character in Boardwalk Empire.
That's true. I actually never got to finish Boardwalk Empire. I think I watched the pilot, which I fell in love with immediately. But I watched it on an airplane, and I didn't get to finish watching the show because at the time I didn't have HBO. It was on HBO, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
So I should probably go back and finish it now that I do have it. This cast of characters is pretty interesting. Although we don't get to see a lot of them get too much play. The ones that we do, it's a good
are
time.
All the named ones.
Yeah, like K. Billy is just around.
He just exists.
Yeah, Mr. Blue, that opening scene, and then he's dead. I'm pretty
sure I can count Mr. Blue's lines on one hand. Mr. Brown, that's just Tarantino having fun. If you took out Mr. Brown, nothing would change.
Yeah.
But Harvey Keitel, he's a a fantastic actor, you know, and I feel like in this movie he plays a good, he does a really good job of portraying this guy who really sees himself as this like noble criminal, this smooth talking normal criminal, noble criminal. And I see that like when he tries to comfort Mr. Orange after he's been shot, and he's, you know, when they're in the warehouse and they're in hiding, and he's like constantly combing his hair back, and he's trying to be a professional, and he tries to be cool by snapping his Zippo open and stuff. And I feel like he's just got an air about him where you're like, he has this personal image, that the way he sees himself, and I don't think he actually is as noble of a man as he thinks he is.
Well, so I love his description in the in the script, right?
Yeah.
Or like just little characteristics that they leave about him, because you know, like he does show in the film like he has like these caring aspects. He seems to trust a lot of these guys, Mr. Orange specifically, who we all know has this secret that he's hiding. But like he's just he also seems like he probably has the most experience, second to Joe, who's I guess in charge of the heist as is.
Well, I think in a deleted scene, the scene's in the script, but it was they filmed it, never made it to the final cut of the film, where they kind of go into the history of his character and kind of, you know, say, oh, he had been arrested at this one point, and he was, he's a very experienced heistman.
So one of the details that they add that I like about it, you know, there's all this talk about how Mr. Blonde is like this vicious psycho killer, but in the script, you know, Mr. White's described as like how his favorite weapons are like these illegal automatic 45 handguns, and like it's his weapon of choice, and it's like, you know, don't let his niceness or his caringness fool you, because like, you know, you cross him and like you're gonna meet the butt end of that gun. Or I guess the barrel of the gun. The butt end would be he would smack you. But at the same time, it's just like I like that duality. But then again, I think you pointed this out to me. Like in the very beginning of the script, it was Mr. White that was written to have some of the like the tipping line, and would also make you think that maybe he's also kind of a shithead for not wanting to tip. And
so I'm wondering if, you know, they changed that for probably a few reasons. One, because I think, if in addition to all the kind of less than good things he does in the movie, it would just be like, oh, and on top of that, he doesn't tip. He's an asshole. But I think it might have been done to kind of spread the love around a bit with the other characters, make sure Mr. Pink gets a good line in and Mr. Blonde gets a memorable moment, and so everybody kind of gets to participate. But it also serves Mr. Pink's character a bit more, because he proves to be maybe the most self-serving out of all of them.
Yeah, but I also feel like, this story, it already has so many faces that we need to kind of focus on. It's not that you can't make each character too complex, but there's enough space to make every character kind of single-faced in a way that you don't need to be too in-depth, because you're already well-rounded by having every character like take on a certain persona and things like that.
Right.
So I can reckon with that. I'm all right. I'm good. Like, that makes total sense to me. But it was just a fun little bit that I felt like was a great addition. But I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I think, that opening scene, it's so fun, and even like the flashback scenes where you get to see the different characters play off each other. You see how Nice Guy Eddie and Mr. Blonde kind of pal around. You see how Mr. White and Mr. Orange, when they're staking out the place, and Mr. Orange is talking to Mr. White about, like, what should I do with this? What should I do here? How should I handle this situation? And I think Mr. White, in his, I I think his big character flaw is he sees the good in too many people.
Yeah.
And that he kind of falls hook, line, and sinker for this, I'm taking this guy under my wing and stuff. And so when he's giving him that advice and stuff, that's, these great moments, it is almost a little heartbreaking to see Mr. White fall for it. But then you have to remember there are plenty of moments where, he's talking to Mr. Pink and they say, did you shoot anyone on the way in? And he says, and they, shakes his head, no, only a couple of cops. And he goes, oh, but no real people. And you get those moments where they find ways to excuse their abhorrent behavior.
Yeah, but I mean, you told me that like these are seasoned criminals, right? Like if they are already used to this kind of work, like why would something like that faze them?
No, sure, I know, but what I mean is more of like the morality of it, where there's plenty of moments I think where, when it's him and it's Mr. White, Pink, and Blonde, and they're all talking, and I think nice guy Eddie walks in, and he's like, "What are you guys talking about?" He's like, "Oh, we're trying to figure out which one of us is the bad guy."
Yeah,
and so it's like none of them actually see themselves as doing anything wrong.
Yeah,
which I think speaks a lot towards their moral compass.
So I want to read a little excerpt about my favorite part of the film, a brief instruction from Mr. White, Harvey Keitel's character, because in it alone, I feel like you get more about him as a character than anything else. It's the scene I sent you earlier.
Yeah.
If you open your scripts to page 87,
let me paint the scene. We're sitting in a nice car with Mr. White and Mr. Orange, and they are staking out the location of the heist, which is a store that sells jewels, and Mr. Orange is inquiring on some information to Mr. White.
So the piece of dialogue goes as such. I will be performing the role of Mr. White, Harvey Keitel. Here we go. When you're dealing with a store like this, they're insured up the ass. They're not supposed to give you any resistance whatsoever. If you get a customer or an employee who thinks he's Charles Bronson, take the butt of your gun and smash their nose in. Drops him right to the floor. Everyone jumps. He falls down, screaming. Blood squirts out his nose. Freaks everybody out. Nobody says fucking shit after that. You might get some bitch talk shit to you, but give her a look like you're going to smash her in the face next. Watch her shut the fuck up. Now, if it's a manager, that's a different story. The manager's no better than to fuck around. So if one's giving you static, he probably thinks he's a real cowboy. So what you gotta do is break that son of a bitch in two. If you want to know something and he won't tell you, cut off his finger, the little one. Then tell him his thumb's next. After that, he'll tell you if he wears ladies' underwear. I'm hungry. Let's get a taco. And then they leave. And scene.
It's a great moment. Again, it shows you what kind of a guy this guy is, but it also there's a confidence to it where you're like, man, I would follow this guy into battle,
right?
Which is it's all the more crushing when it's like by the end of it you realize that he put all of his faith into this dude who only ends up disappointing him.
Yeah, I mean, well, I just love like the duality in that. Like he's okay with talking about such atrocities, and then he's like, "I'm hungry. Let's get a taco."
Yeah, let's
like I mean, that's like probably the funniest thing in this movie, in my opinion. But I mean, like, dude, like that was harsh. That was rough to listen to all that.
Well, I would say
it's not the roughest bit.
But this movie, it does that a lot, where it juxtaposes really unspeakable, horrible things with like things that are maybe a little bit more comforting. And I think obviously no scene encapsulates that more than the torture scene.
Well, I want to say like Mr. Blonde's character, the torture scene, and then Kay Billy's 70s soundtrack of the weekend, whatever it's called. Jesus.
What is such a like, not to sound like I find joy in watching a man get his ear cut off, but that is such an entertaining scene to watch.
So in that documentary I mentioned earlier, QT8, the first date, it was Michael Madsen was talking about what it was like filming that scene and how it wasn't necessarily planned how he would do it. They would just film it on the day, right? So they were there on the day, and Michael Madsen's like, I can't dance, Quentin. Like, I don't know what you want me to do. He's like, come on, you and me, let's just do something. Let's figure it out. He's like, all right. So he let him just kind of figure his way out. They actually like played the music, and he just was he swung around. He did his little thing, and the whole ear business. He would cut off the ear, and it wasn't seen, but and I mean they couldn't show that for several reasons. But it was all improv when he took the ear and says like, "Hello, can you hear me?" And then just threw it
as it was for me.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh my god, like that was improv. Like, dude,
I love that scene. And then of course, like when he like leaves the warehouse and the music fades out and he comes back in. I do want to touch on maybe in a minute after we talk about the scene the use of diegetic sound in this, I think is really cool, but we'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, he walks in, he's got the kerosene, and he's like messing with them.
Yeah,
I love when the police officer was his
Marvin Nash.
Yeah, and he's like, please don't burn me, please. And he's like, you finished? Are you finished? It's like he's a real sick person, and then of course that leads to our big reveal of who the rat really is.
Yeah, it's when Mr. Orange shoots him to shit.
And I love his dialogue there with Nash, where he's like, I'm a cop, and it's like, I know, so and so introduced us a while ago, like 5 months ago, and he's like, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, I mean. I'll tell you what, it's the vignettes of Mr. Orange's kind of backstory that we get.
It's so great.
Where he's going over the monologue and all these different areas and just his anecdote. Yeah, that one, I really liked, I want to say the use of cross-cutting for that, because it's not cross-cutting in the traditional sense where it's like, oh, the music and the sound from one scene going into the other, but rather like the story being told, and as it's being told, like sharing like all these cuts.
Yeah, it keeps transitioning.
Yeah, that
is something
I suppose we still call that cross-cutting.
That is a really cool technique that I don't think we see in any other Tarantino film. It's a very creative way to tell the story.
I would say you get a much milder, like a more traditional for like cross-cut version in Hateful Eight when Samuel Jackson is talking about his big dingus.
Oh, my big black dingus.
Yeah. But I mean, I can't imagine or remember them doing anything else like that in any of his other films.
It's definitely unique, like for this movie and maybe Hateful Eight. But yeah, and kind of like you mentioned, with the music and how it helps us transition to a lot of scenes. So what's cool about this movie with its music is a lot of times the music informs a scene, and like they'll play a cool song and that'll lead into something. But so often these are what they call diegetic sound, which is sound that originates from somewhere in the film. So what I like is we get that cool opening diner scene, and then they go and they start walking to the car, and you hear K Billy come on, and he talks about whatever, Little Green Bag. Little Green Bag starts playing, and it's a cool scene, and at this point you feel like this is actually non-diegetic sound, but then as the song plays and keeps going, suddenly you start hearing like grunts and groans and like kind of shrieks of pain over it. And as the scene fades in, you realize that song's playing on the radio of the car that Mr. White is driving, with Mr. Orange bleeding out in the back.
Yeah.
And you see it again, obviously, with Mr. Blonde torturing Marvin Nash. He turns on the radio, and then that song kind of takes over the scene. And when he steps out of the warehouse, the music fades away, and it comes back as he walks back in.
But he's still like mouthing the lyrics a bit, at least. From what I can remember. And even in the script, like it was written that like he's still like wording them, and there's like a brief dialogue where he's just singing the lyrics and everything. I'm like, oh, dude, like that's such. Oh, yeah, it doesn't get better than that.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of. I think as you get further into Tarantino's filmography, the use of non-diegetic sounds I think becomes a lot more common. That's why we get like David Bowie in a World War II film, or Rick Ross in a antebellum South film. But
a lot of people didn't appreciate that. I love that.
I love that.
That was one of
so
my
much.
favorite bits.
That's such
it's one that's incredibly
Coffins.
fitting.
100 Black Coffins is a great song. I will fight anyone.
Yeah.
But I love the sound design of this movie. The gunshots, when they do ring out, they're super loud. The horrible sounds that come from that torture scene. It's just I think it's great. I love the set designs of some of this stuff when they're in what's his name, Joe Cabot's office.
His office. Oh, like the wood paneling on everything.
Well, not just that, but like the elephant tusks that flank his desk chair.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, this guy's a real piece of work.
Yeah. I would. I think in the end, what I really appreciated was more like just the warehouse, that open space. There was literally nothing. I mean, I guess there were some things in there, but they utilized that space all for the actors. Like it's their little playground. And I mean, like that's what I mean. Like the most attractive thing to me about this movie is the characters and the dialogue and how it was written. Tarantino's obsession with this character-based, dialogue-heavy story, and most of his movies are super dialogue-heavy, but it's just like that. This is like when you realize, like, wow, like name another filmmaker who can kind of repeat the same thing. People don't make movies like this anymore. Like they do and they don't. I mean, the ones that are more dialogue-heavy, I feel like. I mean, I hate to say it, but filmmakers like Woody Allen, right? Like he's a dialogue-heavy kind of guy. But it's not like Christopher Nolan, who his dialogue and his character stories
has fallen off.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really unfortunate because Tarantino realized like that's his strong suit.
Well,
I mean, like, and it proved fruitful for him when he won his Academy Award like a couple years following. That he's like, okay, this is like what I'm good at, and I'm gonna keep doing this.
He didn't win for writing for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but I forget the movie he lost to, because that was I think the first one in a while where he had written a movie and
he wasn't nominated for writing for Hateful Eight, at least Academy Awards.
Let's see.
Stand by as a script or screen fact checks their information for the first time live on the show. We are fact checking our information. Actually, we do a lot of things where we'll definitely throw out some I don't want to say some words, but just some misinformation. I think I caught myself on one recently. I'm trying to remember what it was. I've messed up a couple times, I will admit it.
I'm just trying to find the winners of this particular Academy Award night.
Are you looking for screenplay or director?
No, for screenplay. Awards, screenplay. Of course. How could I be? It went to Parasite, and
Bong Joon-ho.
Yes, and I remember being like, because I distinctly remember being like, he didn't win, but like. It's fine because the winner totally deserved it. Yes, Parasite.
I was going to say, I'll tell you what, because Parasite was awesome in every sense of the word. I also characters and story but it's just like that's what you need. There was no way in hell Joker was going to win. Actually, was it nominated for writing? It wasn't nominated for writing.
It was not. Well, adapted, I think.
Oh, Knives Out. I thought Knives Out had a good. Now we're on the topic. I really did think Knives Out, Rian Johnson had an opportunity. In which case, if he would have won, I would have went at all the Star Wars non-believers out there and said, "Told you so." This guy knows how to write something.
I think with Parasite, Bong Joon-ho even like specified like Tarantino, like you're one of my inspirations. So like
he even pointed out Martin Scorsese, who was sitting out there.
So, but I think it shows even in something like Parasite, where you go, he prioritized character over plot and let the characters kind of lead the plot, and that's what you get with Reservoir Dogs. I love with the dialogue in Reservoir Dogs. There's so many little things you can glean from the characters, just by how they say things or what they say. Like I love that when we're in Mr. Orange's his house or whatever, in his flashback, and you see he's got a Silver Surfer poster.
Yeah.
And then later when he's talking to Holdaway, and he's talking about Joe Cabin, he's like, this guy, he looks like the Thing, from the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
And like, I like that, he's a bit of a nerd, he's got that going on. It's a consistent thing. Nice Guy Eddie calls Joe daddy, which, I realize he's the son, but it's like, this is a guy who's trying to be like a tough heart criminal, but you see he's still like a spoiled little brat.
Yeah.
All these little character moments.
That is a weird juxtaposition too, when you think about it. Like that, it's kind of funny, but also creepy.
And then also like again, even if it's not dialogue, even if it's just like the way the characters are written, I mentioned it before, the way Mr. White, snaps at his Zippo to light it instead of just lighting it like a normal person. It tells you a lot about who this guy is, how he wants to be seen by people.
He's got style. I don't know. He tucks in his polo shirts, and like he wears his pants a little too high for me. I'll say that much.
Well, he's an older guy.
Yeah, he has a style of a different generation.
At one point, Mr. Orange, he puts on a ring, and I don't think they ever explain it, and I always assumed that was meant to just show that he has something to lose. Yeah. In all of this, he is someone who, unlike everyone else, he's not a criminal. And so, this, there's something more at stake for him than just a botched heist, or his own life.
Yeah, I mean, they make an effort to mention that as well. I feel like it was mentioned in the movie, too. Maybe I'm just remembering the reading, but they talk about, like, going undercover. You don't go undercover unless you know that there's something to lose. Like when he was worried about not having backup, or that the backup would be too close by, and that they knew that the rendezvous was in like a non-windowed kind of warehouse location. So there was always a sense of fear, but going into it, we realized after rewatching that round table in the beginning, like none of these guys, it's not going to end up well for any of them. So, but of course you only would get that upon second viewing. But it was just a really great way to kind of introduce and really kind of explore these different characters, these different faces. I'll tell you one that I wish, or the scene that I kind of hinted to earlier was the very end. Right, the Mexican standoff between Joe as he walks in. Eddie had already been there, and we then find Mr. White, and I guess Mr. Pink, just kind of standing in the background, like they're all still trying to figure out who's the rat, who let us out to the cops, and then Joe finally arrives, the boss.
Yeah, I like when Joe arrives and he's like, he's the rat, I knew it. I didn't get a good vibe about him. I don't know why.
It's instinct. That's your proof. It's instinct.
Yeah, and he's like I should have said something before we even got this thing started, and damn me for not thinking of it. But when they're all pointing their guns at each other, and I love Harvey Keitel's line. He's like, you shoot that man, I'll shoot you dead. I repeat, I will shoot you dead.
And then I like Eddie's lines like, you stop pointing that gun at my dad, or something like that. Like,
Yeah,
so I mean, like, Daddy's boy.
Actually, when I remember when I first watched it, I had to like rewind it I think once or twice just to kind of track who fires first and stuff. And it's definitely Joe shoots Orange, White shoots Joe, Eddie shoots White,
And they all just kind of repeatedly fire at each other
and then
until they fall.
Pink's like, I gotta get the hell out of here.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I didn't get this, I guess, necessarily at first, because I know that maybe you didn't necessarily either, but in the script, they make it very evident to make you, aware of what's going on as soon as Pink leaves the warehouse. Mm-hmm. Versus in the movie, the dialogue is very subtle. You can hear that the police are outside and just sort of what's going on. That you hear Pink is yelling, the police are yelling back at him, shots fired. There's a bullet exchange, if you will.
Right.
And then later, the cops bust in. But it was so subtle, you could almost miss it unless you had really great audio device listening experience. And I don't think I would have realized, like, oh, like, he did die if I hadn't read that last bit.
Yeah, I think in my mind, before I, saw the script, I think it was more ambiguous in my mind. If anything, I think I just kind of assumed they must have snatched him up because Orange had been saying that they were right around the corner.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's almost comedic when he like crawls out from under the ramp and just runs away with the rocks.
I mean, why not just end it right there? That would. He's the only professional. Why wouldn't he get the spoils of war?
But I like this. When Mr. White he's cradling Orange and he. Orange finally tells him, I'm sorry, I'm a cop, and he just kind of breaks down right there, and it's a little sad, but at the same time I go, well, you kind of had it coming.
What did you expect? Yeah, exactly. It's the subtleties that give it away.
There's this interesting thing they talk about with White and Orange. I'm trying to find it. Talking kind of like
an
about
article, if you will.
Huh?
I said an article, if you will.
No, it's. I think it's just kind of like Tarantino's. His what he's talked about.
His idea behind their relationship.
Yeah, and just how he talked about how it was an honor between the two that kind of went beyond just honor among thieves or anything like that. It was like it went beyond their positions. It was like they felt a real camaraderie with each other, and that's what leads to White in a moment of comforting Orange as he's injured is that he tells him his name and stuff.
So, but I feel like that appeared a little more casual. I understand what you're saying. Like, they did kind of transcend the regular relationship that could have been just kind of construed on the surface. But, that, I don't know. I would just say Mr. Orange is just a good kind of cop, if you will, like, or undercover agent, where it's not like he's not acting very incredibly suspicious. I think there was actually one point where he even shoots someone.
Oh yeah, that is
during
the scene where he gets shot is such a crazy scene because White takes out his dual pistols and he's unloading on the police officers, and then you have to think from Orange's perspective, he's just has to stand by and watch as his people he might even know are being mowed down in front of him, and then they go to get away and he opens the door to pull the woman out and she shoots him. And it's this great reversal of like, well, he, at the beginning, you just know he got shot and it almost sounds like he got caught up in the crossfire between the police and the main guys, the Reservoir Dogs. And that it almost becomes like it. This whole thing kind of feels like you could sum up a lot of the events of this movie by saying what a waste.
Right.
All of it was such a waste because they all
But
die in the end and nobody.
but I would also say that moment in particular, kind of like that he did take a bullet for the sake of their getaway in a way,
Right.
like, and it wasn't on purpose. It just kind of happened. So I feel like that also told Mr. White that he, like all he needed to know about this guy outside of whatever relationship that they shared. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I think that also counts for something because Mr. White did defend him. Like, I know this man, even though he didn't fucking know that guy. Like trying to defend his honor. Like, what. I like what Tarantino had to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some interesting stuff there at play, morality wise. One other thing I did want to mention real fast before I think we're gonna kind of wrap it up here, but is in Mr. White's flashback. I don't know if this was just Tarantino just throwing out a couple of names that would later have more significance to them, but or if this was just Tarantino hedging his bets. But he says he talks about somebody by the name of Alabama, who we will get to know later in Jackie Brown, and they mention someone who I couldn't say who, but someone by the name of Marcellus.
Marcellus Wallace?
I don't know. I guess we'll have to check back in with the Tarantino verse.
I was gonna say, well, this is his first movie, so it's like those could have all been throwaways.
Exactly.
But like he really utilized his cinematic universe.
And I do wonder if he knew kind of ahead of time, like, hey, if I get to make another movie, I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna name this character this Marcellus Wallace. So I'm gonna drop the name Marcellus here in this movie, so it can come up later. Or if it was more of he wrote Pulp Fiction after the fact and said, you know what? I'm going to call him Marcellus. And then it sounds like I had a plan the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, they also name dropped Pam Grier.
Yep.
Little did we know
who would go on
she would then appear Jackie Brown.
Right. Exactly. And that one I almost want to chalk up to just Tarantino being a fanboy of like 70s.
A super fan.
Yeah. Of like 70s exploitation films. And then he got to make his own version of that, his own take on that, when he maybe single-handedly changed the face of cinema with his next movie. So,
I mean,
I think when you look at his whole career, there's a lot of little fun things in this first movie where you go like, that came back later. The trunk shot, the shot that looks up from inside the trunk. We see that later in Pulp Fiction. We see it in Jackie Brown. I don't know if
Inglourious Bastards.
Do we see it in Inglourious Bastards?
In the very end, where it's Yudovich, this might be my masterpiece.
I guess I can kind of it's a looking up, a shot looking straight up. Maybe something in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'd have to go back and check, but yeah, like you start seeing these things where that'll go on to be Tarantino mainstays.
But I mean, there's no arguing that this was an incredible first film.
This is yeah.
This
you can't ask for much better of a freshman attempt.
So without revealing, this will be my final question for you, Zach. Without revealing your top 10, top 9, I guess, Tarantino films, only reveal the place of which you would stack Reservoir Dogs.
Oh.
Where do you put it personally?
Oh God, you kind of caught me off guard here.
Come on, we've had this conversation before.
Have we?
You could tell me. Yeah, I've asked you where you rate this.
Oh God, I don't know. Probably like in like the mid to high range.
Do you have a number? I have a number. I'll give you that number.
What's your number?
This is my third favorite Quentin Tarantino film.
Okay, yeah, it might be like my third or my fourth, depending on the day and how I'm feeling.
Okay.
You know, if I'm in a more like, action heavy mood, or if I'm more in a character heavy mood, But
no. Outside of all the genre crap, if I were to straight up rank his movies, this one would be my number 3.
Well, you know what I'm going to have to do now is I'm going to have to rank all these movies, get a definitive list, so that way the next time we go into Tarantino, which I guess will be, when we cover Pulp Fiction, I can actually start, giving my my actual list.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. Tune in next time to when we talk about Pulp Fiction. Not next episode, but at a later date. I've been your host, Chris Kitchen from Scripter Screen.
And I'm Zach Strackman.
Thanks again. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Billy.
That's it. Thank you guys for listening all this time, and here's to another 10 episodes down the line.
And please don't forget, follow Scripter Screen on the social medias. That's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Scripter Screen. Give us a like, give us a follow, share it with your friends. If you have any suggestions, leave us a comment, or go to scripterscreen.com and send us a message. Maybe you could be featured in a future episode.
Tell us your favorite Tarantino movie.
Thank you, and have a great day.
Bye.